Jackie Bird. She was the one who gave me the bone marrow transplant.
Save a life while you can in your lifetime.
Annual Legislative Conference, organized by the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We are thrilled to have you all here, absolutely overwhelmed and humbled by the response that we've gotten to this event. This luncheon seems to be growing by bounds just extraordinarily each year, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here. As you probably know, and perhaps you don't know, this condition, Alzheimer's disease, is one that is increasingly impacting our community. And it's affecting people's lives, it's affecting families, and it's affecting quality of life. It's affecting finances. And is a condition that is largely preventable, but people don't really know about it and don't really understand it. So as part of the ongoing work that we do at the foundation, we wanted to make sure that we continue to provide you with very vital information to help you to live healthier lives, productive and successful lives, and really allow you to be able to get information from some of the leading minds in this country. And that's what we're going to continue to do here today. To give you, just to give you an official greeting from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, please welcome Dr. Elsie Scott, our President and CEO.
I would like for everybody to acknowledge the great contributions that Dr. Marjorie Innocent is contributing to the field of public policy around. I don't know whether anybody caught it. Was it broadcast last night, the BET? Okay. Sunday night, if you can catch, BET did a special forum on, they taped it on Tuesday on health and the black community. And Dr. Innocent was a featured panelist on that session, so we hope that you'll catch her on that session. But I want to thank all of you for coming out today to participate in this particular luncheon on lost minds, lost chances, brain degeneration, aging, and African Americans. When we were first approached about doing a piece on Alzheimer's, it was something that the foundation had not done before, but we felt like it's very important because you talk to almost everybody, somebody in their family has been affected by this disease, and most of us really don't have a lot of understanding of it. So whatever we can do to try to educate people around the disease and what we can do for our communities, for our aging parents, grandparents, other relatives. And as we prepare to become senior citizens ourselves, and we really need to learn more about it. As you know, we do this luncheon every year, the wellness luncheon, and we try to choose a topic every year that's related to issues of the black community. We did one year on heart disease. We did the first year just on general wellness, especially focusing on anti-obesity. And so we are glad this year to focus on we did one year on mental health, and then this year we're doing it on brain degeneration and the African American community. So we are pleased that Congresswoman Christensen has taken time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. And why don't we give her a round of applause for all she does on the Hill. As all of you know, because everybody in this room, I think, you are the people that participate in the Health Brain Trust. You are the health experts, but you have worked with her over the years. It's her being the only female medical doctor in the House, and she has really represented us well, the African American community, and not just the African American community, the health community, well in the Congress. I would also like to recognize the rest of the CBCF staff. I've already recognized Dr. Innocent. We have Dr. Hackshaw. Who else is in the room? Lauren Thompson. And other staffers are outside. As you know, we are doing a conference. We're doing a four-day conference. It feels like 4 years. A 4-day conference here in Washington. This is the first day of our conference. Those of you who have been attending the ALC for years, you know that we used to have sessions on the Hill, and we outgrew the Hill. But Congresswoman Barbara Lee asked this year if we could do the first day on the Hill when a lot of people have not arrived in town, and she thought that they could have enough space for us to have our sessions. Now that we have members of the CBC who control some rooms now. You know, we had a few problems for about 8 years. We didn't have control of the rooms here. But thanks to the new power of the CBC, we're able to get this Canada Caucus room for you. And so we thank the CBC for hosting us over here on the Hill. What we want you to do also is after the sessions, we want you to stop by and see your Congress members. Many of you are represented by Congress members that are not members of the CBC. They need to see you. They need to hear from you. And we are right in the middle of all this healthcare debate. So they need to see and hear from the African American community. They need to know that it's something else besides these town hall fanatics that are out there. So please stop by, make your voices known. That's part of the reason why we are on the Hill today. Now, I'm not going to get on a sermon. I'm not going to start preaching up here. But I would like to recognize our sponsors because, as you know, we would not be able to provide free meals, free material for you if we do not have supporters. Because we are the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is a nonprofit organization, and we depend on our corporate sponsors, foundations, and individuals to help us to raise the money so that we can provide fellowships, internships, and these types of programs for you. And so when we started reaching out to try to find partners, corporate partners, and other partners for this event, there were several people that stepped forth, and we are very pleased that 2 sponsors are with us here today, and I would like to offer my thanks to them. AZIRE, which is represented by Pete Norman. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your support. And the Alliance for Quality Nursing Home Care, represented by Cliff Porter. Thank you for being here. I saw Dr. Willada Edwards in the room. Dr. Edwards, this is the president of the National Medical Association. Thank you for being here. And so we hope that you will join us at the Convention Center tomorrow for the rest of the conference. Tomorrow morning we start with the town hall. On Friday we'll have the Brain Trust. The Health Brain Trust will be meeting over at the Convention Center. So you'll find that we have a lot of events, a lot of workshops that related to everything that you might be interested in. And we have a lot of people from the Obama administration that are participating. Wow. For so long, we had to just reach back to the Clinton administration. But now we have the Obama administration. We have a lot of representatives from the Obama administration who will be participating in panels throughout the week. So please take advantage of them. The members of the Congressional Black Caucus will be joining us. Many of them are tied up with congressional business now, but they will be joining us as they can make time. So thank you very much for your attendance, and enjoy the conference.
I wanted to first allow Mr. Porter to make some comments, if he'd like.
Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this very important event. My name is Clifton Porter, and I work for HCR Manor Care, and am also a member of the Alliance for Quality Nursing Home Care. We're an organization of 16 national providers of long-term care across the country that care for 300,000 nursing facility residents each and every day. And obviously this disease, Alzheimer's disease, is an extremely daunting challenge for all of us in the healthcare community, and one that in many ways has been ignored. So we're very excited about presenting this program to you today, and we hope that we all can gain from this time. Thanks again.
And now I'm going to interrupt her meal very briefly here, but the Congresswoman who continues to support the work that we do, and we really would not be able to do everything that we do without her support, just wants to bring you a few remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Innocent, and good afternoon to everyone. Dr. Scott, our sponsors, we want to thank the sponsors for enabling us to be here today, and thank all of you for being here. Welcome to the nation's capital. For those of you who are from away, welcome to your house. And as Elsie asked, we want you to take over this house, show them that it is your house when this luncheon is over, as you spread out around the Capitol to speak to members of Congress. This is a very important discussion, and I want to thank the Foundation for its strong focus on health care. Without health, what else can we do? So, as you know, the Congressional Black Caucus's Health Brain Trust mission is to end disparities in health care. And the disparities for African Americans are across the spectrum and very broad and very deep. We are the most disproportionately impacted by just about every disease. And Alzheimer's is no exception. And it is because of our high prevalence of diabetes, hypertension, and other diseases that we are so prominently in the Alzheimer's disease population. I'm sure everyone in here knows someone who has or has had Alzheimer's. It has touched our office and our office family. And so we really thank the Foundation for discussing this today. I think there are about 5 million people in this country with Alzheimer's disease, and every 70 seconds in the country, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and many of them look like most of us in this room. So thank you again for hosting this session. We invite you to join us at the Convention Center on Friday for our Health Brain Trust session, which is addressing the forgotten faces of healthcare reform. And before I give the mic over to Dr. Innocent, let me just let you know why I am running in and out. We are putting the final touches on healthcare reform today in Energy and Commerce. So hopefully there will be a bill on the floor in the House very shortly, as we expect that there will be one in the Senate when Governor Patrick sends his temporary person over here. We'll have 60 votes in the Senate, and so things are moving on a better course than we might have thought they would be moving maybe a week or two ago. And on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus and really the entire Tri-Caucus, I want to let you know that we have made sure that, at least as of today, and we're trying to keep the money there so that these programs stay in, that prevention is emphasized, that we have provisions that address health disparities, both in language, data collection, especially in the development of our healthcare workforce, and also in making sure that communities play a big role, that they identify what their problems are, that they develop the strategic plans with the help of the Department of Health and Human Services, and that they have those communities like ours that have such high health disparities have priority access to programs in whatever agency that can help you to address those problems. Not just Health and Human Services, but if it's EPA, if it's housing, if it's small business, whatever agency. So we've been able to have those included. We urge you to, as you go across the Hill today, and speak to members, to ask them to make sure that the health disparity provisions in the House bill stay in, and stay in full force. We also have a greater expansion of community health centers as well, and community health workers. Grants for communities, African American and other communities with high health disparities, to hire community health workers and have them from the community, have individuals from the community work within their communities to bring people to the health care services that are there, show them where they are, and then support them in some of the treatments and other things that they're going to be required to do. We really want to make this not just insurance reform. We want to make it healthcare reform. And to make it healthcare reform, we have to transform the healthcare system around the nation, but particularly in communities like ours that have been left behind or out for far too long. So thank you again all for being here, and thank you to the foundation for having us.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for your presence and, of course, for the update and letting us know how things are progressing, because we do believe that that's exactly what they are doing. Before I introduce our speakers, I also wanted to mention Dr. Pierre Vigilance, the director of the Washington, D.C. Health Department, who has also joined us and is a wonderful collaborator. Just wanted to acknowledge him. And now it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce to you our two keynote speakers for today. And believe me, they are fantastic, fantastic researchers and women. Dr. Goldie Bird is the Nathan F. Sims Endowed Professor of Biology at North Carolina A&T State University. And she also happens to be one of the recipients of the prestigious Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring in 2009 from the administration. And Dr. Stephanie Johnson is a consultant for the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute, the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and the Stroke Disparities Program at Georgetown University Hospital, and also the founder of the International Dementia Research Foundation. Please welcome them both.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for inviting me to speak on a subject matter that I have both a personal and professional interest in. As it was stated earlier, so many people are being touched by Alzheimer's disease, and I am no different. My mother has Alzheimer's disease. She was diagnosed at the age of 62, and her mother has Alzheimer's disease. And so this is something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is why I started a foundation, as well as have pursued a research career in Alzheimer's disease, because this disease is significantly impacting the African American community, and we have not been talking about it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what Alzheimer's disease is. I'm going to give some brief information in terms of the pathology or the etiology or how the disease starts, and talk about some policy implications, because I think that's very important as we continue to do research, and how can our research inform policy. So I think to start off, we often hear Alzheimer's disease and dementia used interchangeably, and this is actually wrong. Alzheimer's disease and dementia are not the same thing. Dementia is actually a syndrome, and it's a syndrome that has a collection of symptoms that are associated with the syndrome. So things like impaired intellectual functioning, emotional disinhibition, and changes in personality and behavior are all symptoms associated with dementia. It's important for us to make sure that we make this distinction. So when we think about dementia, I want you to think about it in terms of it being an umbrella term. And underneath the umbrella, you have specific forms of dementia, which is Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontal temporal dementia. All of these are different forms of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent form of dementia, followed by vascular dementia. And I just want to note that vascular dementia is significantly impacting the African American community. And again, this is never talked about in the literature or in the media. And today, we can become educated and make sure that we begin to educate other people, because that is the reason why African Americans are probably suffering disproportionately from different forms of dementia. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that is. Okay, so Alzheimer's disease is what we call a neurodegenerative disorder, meaning that it's a disorder that is not reversible. There is what we call neuropathology involved with this disease, meaning there are changes in the brain that take place. There are damage to the neurons. I'm going to show you a slide about that in a second. And these changes in the brain result in diminished cognition as well as functional capacity. So what I mean by functional capacity is being able to bathe or feed oneself. And so if anybody has ever taken care of someone with Alzheimer's disease, you have seen these changes take place in an individual. Alzheimer's disease has three basic processes in terms of an early stage, a middle stage, and a later stage. It's very difficult to tell a person, when we see them in the clinic, how long a person is going to stay in one stage or the other. So it varies from person to person. It just depends on the individual. But we do know that it's usually classified in three different stages. And so as the person progresses through the disease, they obviously will need more care. So as you can see here, this is a slide. It's rather busy, but I wanted to at least show you that there are changes that actually take place in the brain. I think many years ago, before we knew a lot about Alzheimer's disease, it was thought to be a mental disorder, and it is not. It is a neuropathological disorder that is degenerative. And so there are changes that take place. There are something called amyloid plaques, which form in the brain, and they form in between the neurons, and we know that neurons help us communicate. They communicate with one another, which helps us function, helps us think. And what happens is this amyloid plaque forms, and it causes problems with the communication between the neurons. We also know that there's something called neurofibrillary tangles. This is all, kind of like Pathology 101, but I just wanted you to know that there are changes that take place in the brain, and this is not just a mental disease. Okay, with that being said, I think it was mentioned that there are about 5.1 million people who are currently diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Well, I'm here to tell you that's probably a gross underestimation. As you can see, this was back in 1990, and I wanted to show you an old slide because back then, we thought by 2010 there would be about 5.9 million people who were estimated to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Well, again, that's an underestimation. I would say it probably is double that. And as you can see, by the year 2050, it says it'll be about 14.3 million people, but you probably should times that by 2. So this is a significant health issue, and this issue is really impacting African Americans because we actually have the highest incidence and prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. We are being affected disproportionately by this disease. And here we go. So the Alzheimer's Association released these statistics a while ago. So it's been known for quite some time that African Americans appear to have a higher incidence and prevalence rate of Alzheimer's disease, but we were trying to figure out why that is. Some of the more recent studies have suggested that there is also a greater familial risk of Alzheimer's disease, and that's actually a study I'm involved with at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where we're looking at children of individuals who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease because, in my opinion, that is really how we're going to solve the mystery of Alzheimer's disease. It's not by studying those who have the disease, it's by studying those who have not developed the disease yet or who may be at risk for developing the disease, and to look at their brains and how their brains function so that we can figure this very complex disease out. Okay, this is something that I think is extremely important, and my colleague, Dr. Bird, can probably speak to this as well. Recently, we've been seeing more and more information on the connection between the heart and the brain. Well, we know they work in concert with one another, but researchers have found that vascular disease are significant risk factors for developing Alzheimer's disease. And this, we think, might be contributing to the disproportionate effects of Alzheimer's disease on the African American community. We know that African Americans have the higher prevalence of hypertension. We know that African Americans have a higher prevalence of type 2 diabetes, as well as high cholesterol. All three of those vascular diseases are significant risk factors for developing Alzheimer's disease. Again, this is often not discussed or talked about in the media, and this is information we need to know, because when you're talking to a loved one, you need to make sure that they're controlling those diseases. They can certainly decrease their risk for developing Alzheimer's disease as they age. So it's very important, if you've been diagnosed with hypertension, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, making sure you control these diseases. So I like to use this little schematic because people always say, well, how can we prevent Alzheimer's disease? Well, we're still trying to figure that out. And actually, future research is looking more at prevention now. Also, future research is looking at, or current and future research is looking more at the gene-environment interaction. And Dr. Bird is going to talk a little bit more about the genetics of Alzheimer's disease, because it's extremely important. For many years, I think we focused on genes and how genes were influencing the development of this disease. We didn't even think about the environmental risk factors. So now that we've become more educated and know that it significantly influences the development of the disease, researchers are starting to communicate with one another, and we're seeing a lot of multidisciplinary studies looking at various aspects of how this disease onset may be functioning in African Americans as well as majority populations. But one of the things I want you to take home is that what's good for your heart, whatever you hear that's good for you to do, that will help you have good heart health, is very good for your brain as well. So diet, exercise, reducing stress, all of those things are very good for your brain. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about some of the policy implications of the research that we do. One of the things I've been advocating for since I've started doing research in this area is really reconceptualizing the classification of Alzheimer's disease. It's never talked about as a health disparity, and it is one. And I think we need to make sure, I think it was talked about earlier, letting people know, letting Congress know, because the more we have our voices heard, we can actually get more money and health disparities money so that we can study this disease, because it is impacting African Americans. So reconceptualizing the classification is extremely important of this disease. Increasing funding for research, that's a no-brainer. That is definitely a no-brainer. Promoting the development of a culturally competent healthcare system. I know that we often hear about cultural competence, but it's true. We know that culturally competent healthcare systems definitely increase better healthcare outcomes for people of color. And so, again, that's another no-brainer, but we need to think about and talk about this. Mobilizing and educating the community, which is what we're doing today. This is something that myself and Dr. Bird have been doing for quite some time. When I first started doing this work, I found that African Americans had no idea of what Alzheimer's disease was. It was thought that it was a normal part of aging, in fact. And I thought that was very scary, because people would come into the clinic and they would be in the more advanced stages of the disease. And at that point, all we could do was tell them to go home and tell their loved ones to keep them comfortable. That's not good. And we also need to be able to inform policy with research. Dr. Bird is a good example of this, because she trains future researchers like myself. Or I'm a current researcher, but she has trained me and she is my mentor. We have to have more representation in the world of research and let the research that we are doing drive and inform policy. Finally, Marjorie, Dr. Innocent, asked me to talk a little bit about the foundation that I started. And again, this was just a labor of love, because I was affected by this disease. I was also seeing people, like I said, that looked like myself, and they were being diagnosed at a later stage of the illness, and it was very disturbing. So I started the foundation in 2005, and this is a foundation that's dedicated to ethnically diverse populations who are dealing with Alzheimer's disease as well as other dementias, and also we cater to women. Our three goals are educational awareness, I'm in the midst right now of developing a clinical research program so that we can be in control of the dollars and we can see the type of research that can be inclusive of African Americans as well as Hispanics and other communities of color. And also, the third goal is to provide grants and fellowships to future scholars who are interested in going into the career field of aging. This is so important. We know that there aren't enough primary care physicians, and if you siphon that off even a little bit more, there are definitely not enough people going into the field of geriatrics and gerontology. This is a field that is growing. We don't have enough practitioners to care for the individuals. We know that the baby boomers are now the majority of this country, and they're going to significantly impact the healthcare system. So these are all things that I thought were very important, which is why I wanted to at least try to do my part and provide some funding to encourage ethnically diverse students to go into this field. So with that being said, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Bird, and she will continue. Thank you.
Someone needs to be able to see it. Yeah. He's on. So I can just, yeah, I think it was on. Good afternoon again. And certainly, as Dr. Johnson, I'm very grateful to be here today and want to thank Dr. Innocent, Dr. Scott, and Congresswoman who had to leave, and all of you for coming out to hear about this dreadful disease, and particularly in African Americans. Next slide. Again, I'm endowed professor at North Carolina A&T State University and have spent my academic career at HBCUs, and so there has never really been a better place to study this kind of disease than at an HBCU. Just keep clicking. You know what? I can drive. It might be easier. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about health disparities and just briefly, but I'm sure most of this room already knows about them. Talk to you a little bit about Alzheimer's, and Dr. Johnson has given you an overview of that, so I'm going to weave through that. I'm going to talk about healthy brains and healthy bodies, which, as she mentioned, is a primary feature for folks who are interested in chronic disease. Our brains are part of the body, and as we do a better job of creating situations where we are healthier in general, our brains will be healthier. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our genetic study that we're doing with a number of collaborators and funded by the National Institutes of Health. And I will talk a little bit about what we can do. And I'm going to add just one policy item to what Dr. Johnson has already shared with you. And again, when we look at the leading causes of death, and I apologize, this one is a little bit blurry, Alzheimer's disease is the 7th leading cause of death, 6th actually now, most recently. And when we look at other diseases, other chronic diseases, and particularly those that are that disproportionately burden African Americans and other underrepresented people, we see in some cases that the death rates are declining. We're doing better, but we're getting more and more people dying from Alzheimer's disease. And of course, one might expect that because as we live longer, we are going to suffer with chronic disease, and particularly Alzheimer's after about the age of 85. 50% of us are going to have some kind of dementia anyway. So there's never been a better time to begin to think about a disease such as AD, Alzheimer's, and I'll say AD from time to time, than now. As a matter of fact, in a couple of years, that first group of baby boomers are going to be 65 years old. I'm one of them, so I'm very excited to be working on Alzheimer's disease. So when you think about Alzheimer's disease, there are all kinds of things health disparities in general. There are all kinds of reasons, and one of the many ones, important ones, certainly is socioeconomic. And of course, we live very stressful lives, and we typically don't take care of ourselves the way we should, and that's why we need more education. There needs to be more knowledge out there about diseases in general, and particularly Alzheimer's disease. As a matter of fact, for many of the chronic diseases, education is a risk factor, or the lack thereof. So we also know about what the results or the effects of health disparities and what they actually do for any population of people, and particularly African Americans who suffer disproportionately with a number of these diseases. So again, if we look at these areas or these ethnic groups that are defined as by the National Institutes of Health, certainly African Americans fit right there in the middle, and we are disproportionately burdened. All right? Now, again, one of the reasons that we can't really speak too definitively about Alzheimer's disease in African Americans is because we don't know much about this disease in African Americans, relatively speaking. If we were to do a PubMed search, we would see that we represent so little, we as in African Americans represent so little of the literature that is out there on this disease. So when we talk about policy, and I'll just infuse policy all the way through, as Dr. Johnson said, we certainly need more researchers and researchers trained in biomedical diseases, diseases that disproportionately affect minority populations. We also have to train more healthcare providers, as you say, and that's the one that we at North Carolina A&T State University are trying to address as well. We sometimes call this a silent epidemic because, as was mentioned, we don't like to talk about it as much as many other diseases. It's almost as if we're going to catch it or something if we talk about it, or we're going to label somebody. But in essence, we really do have to talk more and more. We need to get it more and more out into the community. We do quite a bit of that with our research project, and all across the country, we're doing a better job. It's expected that by 2015, 16 million Americans, and that's approaching the numbers that we know about for diabetes today, will have Alzheimer's disease. So we're unless there's a cure. And again, as I mentioned before, if we look at the percentage change in the leading causes of death, the one that spikes up here in the red is Alzheimer's disease. And that's because we're doing a better job with some of these in terms of health care, as well as knowledge-based outreach. And as we are doing better with these other diseases, guess what? The gift for that is Alzheimer's, unless there's a cure. So I'm gonna whiz by this because Dr. Johnson has already covered that in terms of contributors and risk factors. Just really want to stress, though, from this slide that there are genetic factors that we are interested in, as she mentioned, and there are genetic, environmental, and genetic factors that play together. So we're interested, and there are researchers all across the country who are interested in these gene-environment interactions. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. What is important for people to know of any race or ethnicity is that as soon as there are signs, we have to get a diagnosis and get some help. And often we won't get that help from the primary care physician. I'm having some conversations with a number of physicians right now about how folks can be referred to the appropriate person in a much more efficient manner and much faster, so that perhaps as more and more drugs come through, more and more efficient drugs are designed, and hopefully some designed by genetic information on African Americans, certainly we need to get to the right person sooner so that the right kinds of therapies can be more effective. Right now, there are several really good drugs out there, and you probably know about them. They're very common. But speak louder. Thank you. Okay. I usually don't have that problem. I have 3 kids and a husband. I usually do pretty well with that, but I'll come closer. Thank you. But there are some good drugs out there now, but these drugs simply delay the process of disease 6 months to a year. So we have a long way to go. And as Dr. Johnson said, this is a real disease that affects different portions of the brain, areas that involve intelligence, judgment, behavior, memory, and language, and so forth. And if we were to look at the pathology, or we look at the scans, we would see that the brain really does begin to atrophy or waste away because of the problems that the neurological changes in the brain. This is one of the stories that we like to tell when we go out into the community because, as she said, we call this disease everything. We call it senility. We call it aging. We even call it old-timers disease, anything except Alzheimer's disease. But we like to put some pathology with that so that people understand this is a real disease, it is diagnosable, but there is no cure at this time. I want to talk just a minute or two about caregiving because it places such a tremendous burden on families. If you want to split a family, you have a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, you will find that people scatter, and usually there's one person left to take care of a loved one. That's happening more and more. Last year, the Alzheimer's Association said that there were about 10 million Americans providing unpaid health care. And that translates into about 8.5 billion hours, and it has an economic value of about $95 billion for the United States. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Yes. So that doesn't begin to talk about the total cost of this disease to the country. That's just talking about a prediction of how much unpaid health care, and we're talking about people who have loved ones in the home or even loved ones at maybe the nursing home, and they're spending 10, 15 hours a week taking care of loved ones. Because unless there is an intervention, unless there's a cure, Alzheimer's disease patients are going to wind up in a nursing home or some type facility. No matter how no matter how much we promised Aunt Jane when we were 10 that we would never put them in a nursing home, these patients typically will wind up there unless there is an intervention. So there are many other issues regarding caregiving that we have to provide information about. The stress that it causes on the family, the physical health, the mental health, the family finances can go if we don't take good care and provide people with information about the need for a healthcare power of attorney, the need for putting the finances in place, because the loved ones really will not be able to handle these kinds of responsibilities. They will sell the house 10 times, and you won't even know it. They simply don't know what they're doing, and they need help. And so we owe it to families, we owe it to the communities to get out and share this information, and also to help them to find support groups. So there's so much community work that we as scientists and community lay people as well, each of you can be an advocate for helping with this disease. The importance of early diagnosing, and again, as Dr. Johnson said, the numbers really are low. We truly believe that the numbers are low, as well as the numbers that are reported, the number of people who die. Is that me? Sorry. Okay. The number of people who die, the death rates for Alzheimer's disease, very much underreported because often folks who are dying from Alzheimer's disease also have some comorbidity. And usually what's on the death certificate is that other thing. Okay? So the early diagnosis, very important to get the loved one on the right kind of medication and early. And of course, I won't go into these medications, but just to say that there are some out there, and there are several out there that are in different phases of trials right now. So it's very important for African Americans to be a part of the clinical trials process as well as the research process. And so dollars are needed to ensure that there's a connection between the big pharmaceuticals, the healthcare providers, and the community. I'm going to just skip this one for a minute because I want to talk just a second about our research project. So what can you do today? If you have a loved one that you suspect has some changes in cognitive ability, they may have what is called mild cognitive impairment, which means they can do just fine. They can drive or they can do other things, but when they're given the test, it shows that they have some impairment. So pay close attention to our loved ones, find help early, become very knowledgeable about the disease. There's nothing like knowledge. And stay mentally and physically active yourselves, join support groups, adopt support, contact the local Alzheimer's Association chapters and even the national. You can find all kinds of great information there. As a matter of fact, as you see, there's a wonderful, wonderful table out there with bountiful information. And then finally on this slide, join research studies. Of course, take good care of yourself. We are doing a genetic study at North Carolina A&T State University along with Columbia University, Vanderbilt, and University of Miami to understand some of the genetic factors that may influence the susceptibility of Alzheimer's, particularly in African Americans. It will be one of the larger studies in the country that specifically targets African Americans that has a huge genetic base. We will do the genome-wide association study. So we're funded by the National Institute on Aging to do that, as well as the National Center on Minority Health and Health Disparities at the NIH. So we want to find out, we want to understand better the genetic factors, the genetic variants that are involved in this disease, and particularly as it relates to susceptibility. So if there are genetic differences, what are they? We do know that, again, there are environmental influences. And what are the genetic influences that affect environmental influences that people have that promote this disease? And can we detect the differences? We really don't know. In other words, there's still so little that is known in the research world with regard to Alzheimer's in African Americans. So again, these are the universities that are collaborating to understand the genetic and as well as the epidemiological basis of this disease. And so what we're doing is we're going out and doing quite a bit of educational outreach. In other words, we're helping communities understand the disease, to understand, where they can get help, all kinds of support, from medical help to mental help to financial support. And we are trying to be a resource for them, as well as assisting them in understanding the need to participate in clinical trials and, of course, research studies similar to ours. And so we're looking for 2,000 African Americans to participate in our study. And we are finding that it is important to understand how to go into minority communities and understand the culture of that community and to request anything. There are certain things you do, and there are certain things you don't do. And African Americans are more than willing. We just did a major study where we looked at 500 survey participants. We said, what does it take? What would it take for you to participate? What are your fears? What are your anxieties? And what we found, though, is that African Americans are very willing to participate in research studies, our results show. But they need to have an understanding of what is going on, like anyone. They certainly need to feel comfortable with the staff. They need to know that it's helping someone. And so it's a great study for us, and it sort of helped us to demystify some of the things that are the stereotypes that are out there about whether or not African Americans will participate. So we're looking for a couple of 2,000 African Americans to participate in our study, and we're also doing quite a bit, as I said, educational outreach, which is really exciting to go into the communities and assist persons in understanding what is going on with their loved ones and how to get associated with the study or a clinical trial. The truth of the matter is there have been many past atrocities, and so there's a lot of mistrust out there in the African American community. We recognize that early. We admit that early. But the alternative is that we will not know about how this disease works in African Americans unless we participate. We certainly will not know how drugs perform in African Americans unless we participate in clinical trials. So that's another area in which we have to do a better job of working with our healthcare providers and ensuring that African Americans and other underrepresented groups are participating in both research and clinical trials. So, again, this is a progressive disease, incurable, but with everybody's help, we will get better. And we believe there is a cure out there. Okay?
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Bird. We do have time for a few questions. I am going to ask you to come up to the mic. As you can see, I literally am walking it over to the stand. It's going to be located right here, so if you have a question, please come over to the mic. I did also want to mention very quickly, most of you should have received, thank you, sir, an evaluation form, a blue evaluation form for the session. I'm not sure that we made enough copies, so if you didn't get one, I do apologize. If you actually would like to fill it out, let me know. I can send it to you by email, and you can always send it right back. Make sure you submit that form to someone at the desk on the way out. Thank you so much.
Let's see, I'm going to put this to the end.
Thank you so much for your presentations. My question is about the 3 stages that are known right now that patients tend to exhibit behaviorally as the disease progresses. Can you speak just for a second about that? And where can we go online and get a copy of your slides?
Go ahead. Oh, okay. You want me to take that one?
Or can we?
Okay. I'm sure that we can find a way to make the slides available to you. So I did mention that there are 3 specific stages. There's the early stage, and in the early stage, the types of changes you will see will be very mild. You would see short-term memory problems. That's going to be the major issue that you will see an individual having. You might see a little bit of change in terms of personality and behavior. If there was somebody who was outgoing, they may be a little more inhibited. They may be a little more quiet. And as they progress into the middle stage, they start to exhibit more significant memory impairment with short-term memory. They are now starting to need help with activities of daily living. So they shouldn't be cooking anymore, so you may have to cook for them. You may have to help them in terms of bathing, things of that nature. As they continue to progress into the later stages of the disease, they need 24-hour-a-day care. Individuals can look in the mirror, they don't even recognize themselves, they won't recognize their children or their loved ones. Language becomes muted. And eventually, what happens to a lot of Alzheimer's patients is actually they have difficulty swallowing, and so they cannot eat. So, and a lot of times, obviously not getting the nutrients and being able to eat usually, exacerbates the disease, ultimately resulting in death. And I also wanted to say, too, I know you didn't ask this, but in order to, a person, when they go to the doctor, they get a clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. This is just a clinical diagnosis. Only until the person has passed away and we can harvest their brain and take a slice of the brain can we give them a definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Oh. I just wanted to make sure I didn't make that point, but that's important.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the information. You kind of answered one of my questions when you were speaking with her about dieting. I've read in places where they say your diet is an important part of that, about what they've eaten growing up, and that it can help by changing their diet. Is that true, or you guys are still doing research on that?
We are doing research on that, but that is very true. As a matter of fact, more and more research now is being done on the preventative side, as you mentioned, and certainly your diet is very, very important, maintaining a healthy weight, reducing the stress in your life, having a balance, but certainly what you eat is very, very important, reducing the salt and fat, making sure your cholesterol is down below 200. I think it's below 200. Absolutely. There are some physicians in the house, they probably would argue that, but I believe it's about 200 or less. But certainly your diet is very, very important because, again, the brain is a small organ, but it's one of the most vascular organs in the body. You've got, 100 billion nerve cells, and you got all this vasculature in the brain. So if you think about vascular diseases, diseases that we think of, we call vascular diseases such as diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, keeping that high blood pressure. All of those diseases impact your chances of getting Alzheimer's disease. So absolutely, good nutrition is so significant, so important. And also, when we think about this disease, we have to think about socioeconomics, because everybody can't afford, the same kinds of foods in the same neighborhoods and living in different environments. So it's a big socioeconomic issue as well. But yes, nutrition is critical.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Point of clarification, you mentioned that Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death. Is that of all deaths, of all groups, or just African Americans?
All groups.
All groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. It's not going to stay.
Good afternoon. Doctors, thanks for being here and sharing this information. My name is Marie Lamel from Glendale, California. And I know that the information you're sharing, so many of us don't hear about it in our community. Just a suggestion for outreach through the Black Press. I'm part of the National Association of Black Journalists. That's the NABJ. And also the Black Press is also known as the National Newspaper Publishers Association. There is a reception on Friday at the W Hotel from 5 to 7, or no, 7 to 9 p.m. It would be very, very important to speak to publishers and editors and keep them informed about your foundation, also about your research, and continuing, not just one time, and also outreach for clinical trials. I'd like to speak to both of you after to help spread the information and get it across the nation.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Bird and Dr. Johnston. I'm Melanie Newkirk from Los Angeles, California. I'd like to direct something to you all and to the head of the National Medical Association, if she's still in the room. If you noticed on CNN when Soledad did this study on black people, and there was a black doctor there, I think she was in New York, doing research on cancer, breast cancer, and how it affected black women. Mm-hmm. And she did a DNA study and then went to Africa, to Ghana, to do additional study to see if there was some correlation with that. And I was wondering if you all were doing anything like that. That's the first question. The other question is, do you plan to have a video like Marie Shriver did on Alzheimer's? I know they had a lot of money in order to do that. And I was wondering if the National Medical Association, doctor, is going to do anything on that. And the other thing, doctor, is the National Medical Association going to testify on this health issue? I should hope so, because they're showing all these other medical associations and not the National Medical Association, which I know of. Please.
You want to take?
Okay. We have a 30-minute documentary that we are getting tweaked as we speak. And we are working with a group out of Durham, North Carolina, and actually I might even have a copy of it, but we are revising it because we would love to put it out, and we actually have a couple of 30-second ones here today, but we didn't set the sound up that I was going to share with you. But yes, we have, and we'd love to work with the NMA to get that out. Absolutely. And your other question was?
Well, the idea of the DNA.
Oh, the genetics.
Yes, genetics.
Yes, I know of what you're talking about with cancer, and right now I'm not working with Africa, even though I'm getting ready to write an international program. But our study is, well, there's some epidemiological work and there's some imaging work, but the primary is the genetic work that we're doing. So that is the primary piece of that study, yes. Yes, but it's not with Africa.
But there is, even though I know Dr. Bird's work is not, but there is a researcher out of the University of Indiana named Hugh Hendry.
Oh, that's right.
Who has actually done some epidemiological studies comparing African Americans and Nigerians and Caucasians in terms of prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. And he found that Nigerians actually had the lowest prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. And so we definitely think, and this is really what sparked a lot of the environmental work that is being done today. So there is some, but there really needs to be a genetic study, you're right, looking at this from an international standpoint. But there is, at least there is an interest in looking, cross-culturally, and we're finding some really surprising results.
And not only the environmental work, but even the genetic work that's been done with African populations is a little bit different from what you see in Caucasians. So that helped to spark our interest in the genetic side as well. So really, folks come to the United States and get sick. The United States makes people sick, sometimes.
Dr. Bird, Dr. Johnson, I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing. And I wanted to know if there is any update on a gene that's being researched to identify Alzheimer, and how important is it to know that, you have a gene that could predispose you to Alzheimer's?
Great. Last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, 2 new genes were discovered, and both of those were involved in clearing the amyloid plaques from the brain. And so those are the most, I will say, the most powerful ones, I'll say, since we discovered the 4 that were out there, the big ApoE, APP, amyloid protein, and presenilin 1, presenilin 2 years ago, back in the 70s. So just 2 weeks ago, and there was this huge study, and I think maybe there were about 6,000 folks in that study. It was not targeted to any specific group, though. But yes, some genes are being, and this was the most significant find in genetics in the past 20, 30 years. So it's happening, but it's happening slowly. And that's one of the things we want to do in African Americans, though.
And if I can follow up, how important is it to know that you have that gene?
Yes.
Is it a personal choice that should be made available, or is it?
I believe it's important to know. I would not put too much stock in the only test. Right now, there's only one. That's for the ApoE4 allele. And that test, and one of the reasons I say that for African Americans is because in some studies, it is predictive in some studies, ApoE4. If you have one copy of the ApoE4 mutated gene, you are likely to get it. If you have both copies, a copy from your mother and a copy from your father, you're even more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so that's very significant. However, in the literature, those kinds of data are inconclusive. So I don't know. So it is important. I mean, all of the genetic tests, if they're reliable, it's very important to know. Okay. Because you can begin a plan of care early. So it's very important. And that's why the genetic research is very, very important. So right now, again, we can't put a lot of stock in things because there's just not enough research out there in African Americans. We're going to change that, though.
And it's important. I just want to also follow up that clinically, when you come in, we do not do genetic testing for diagnosis just because of what Dr. Bird just said. It's inconclusive, and there's not enough strong evidence out there right now that would support providing genetic results to individuals. So we absolutely do not do that. We do other things, and that's why I said that you get a clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but we do not do genetic testing for clinical diagnosis.
As a matter of fact, there is a study out there that says the ApoE4, which in the big community, in the big world, it's predictive that you have a higher chance. But in Africa, there is a study that says that allele is protective in African Americans. So again, it's not conclusive yet.
Thank you.
But it's a great question, and it's certainly something that in the future, our hope is that we will have one. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bird and Dr. Johnson. I want to say thank you very much for the information. It was very informative, so I want to first of all say thank you very much. I just flew in from the West Coast on a red-eye flight, so I'm a little late coming in, but I caught most of your presentation towards the latter part. But I just want to get clarity on the 2,000 patients that they're looking for from the clinical trials.
Yes.
Is that for?
It's not a clinical trial. We're looking for 2,000 African Americans. Excuse me for interrupting. We're looking for 2,000 African Americans, 1,000 who have been diagnosed with dementia, and 1,000 who are, if they're 60 years old, they can be in our study. And so we will. They don't have to come to us. We will go to them.
Okay.
And we can collect patients from all over the country.
Okay.
So if you've got about 1,000 patients, I'll be happy to talk to you.
No, I want to be a foot soldier to help you because I do my own personal research. I spent 15 years in the healthcare industry with Shearing Plow Pharmaceuticals and Allergan, but I just know that there's true healthcare disparities being in the industry for so long. That's why I started doing my own passion and going after things that affect our community or people of color in general, not even only here, but even in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia as well.
Wow.
But my follow-up question I wanted to ask you all as well, you mentioned the studies that are taking place on the East Coast. Is there anything out West? Because I just flew in tonight. Is UCLA involved, USC, my alma mater? I just like to help you because I do work with them because we're doing a sister city project that I chair between Mombasa and Long Beach, California. And I would love to be that foot soldier on the West Coast if you're looking for somebody to champion that cause.
We would love to work with you. Please, let's talk afterwards.
Okay, yes.
We'd love to work with. And yes, there are studies going on all over the country. Yes,
okay, thank you. God bless you and thank you for your great work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. A quick question. Before there's been a definitive diagnosis, is it sometimes difficult to distinguish between a metastasis to the brain from something like breast cancer and early Alzheimer's in terms of behavioral symptoms and things like that?
Actually, yes, sometimes it is, because we know that with chemotherapy that there are significant cognitive deficits that take place. And so one of the important things in terms of differential diagnosis is actually doing, we take a lot of information before we will give the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease to an individual. So the person will start off getting a neurological exam, and if the neurologist deems it necessary, they will then get a neuropsychological or neurocognitive assessment, which is about a 4 or 5 hour battery. They will get neuroimaging and MRI. In particular. We also talk to the collaterals, the family, because that is very good information that allows us to see what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So whoever the caregiver is, and we take all of this ancillary information and then we do what we call a consensus diagnosis, so that we are making sure that we're ruling out other possible diseases, because a lot of times, not only when you talk about breast cancer and cognitive deficits, but depression. Depression is huge in the geriatric population, and often depression looks like early Alzheimer's disease. And so it's very important for us to do differential diagnosis so that we can come up with an appropriate treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And they can come, even though, as Dr. Johnson said, the definitive diagnosis comes at autopsy, they can come within about a 90-95% chance of getting that diagnosis correct.
Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Cynthia Macri, and I am actually a gynecologic oncologist, but I do work a lot with older patients with Alzheimer's. And I had to write my question down because I can't remember two things. Anyway, maybe I should see you as a patient. But to completely switch gears, my big concern is that, we're talking about going out into the African American community and talking and bringing the message of many health disparities. But I would like to see get your thoughts on perhaps a targeted effort to ensure and to hold medical schools accountable for teaching cultural competency in the medical schools.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, there's a huge effort to recruit minority medical students, as you all know, which is also falling very short. And, but because of the cost of medical education, the students of color that attend medical schools are frequently not from the communities to which we need to reach out. They're usually from wealthy families or from families who already have that level of education. So what I would really like to get your thoughts on is how we can hold medical schools and the medical community itself accountable for teaching cultural competency.
Wow. No, you can take that one.
Okay. It's funny that you mentioned that. I just did a lecture on cultural competence at Georgetown University Hospital on Monday. And one of the things that I tried to stress is that this has to be a system-wide change throughout the entire system. And I think that's where cultural competency actually has failed. Because intrinsically the system has to be motivated to want to incorporate cultural competence. So it's system-wide, meaning at the MCO level, at the academic institutional level, at the health professional level, and then all the way up to the student. So it's important. I mean, often what happens is you may teach cultural competency to students, but it doesn't resonate down throughout the system. And so in my opinion, I think that's where we're falling short. I mean, even with I'm working on a stroke disparity study, and one of the biggest issues we have is the lack of understanding for cultural competence. And that's from the primary investigators. So in my opinion, it has to be a systematic change. The system has to be intrinsically motivated to want to change, because a lot of times people, you hear people say, oh, we want to be culturally competent, but they're not really ready to make that change. And so you have to make it on multiple levels within the system.
And another area that we have to do a better job with is training students from different populations to prepare them to go to medical school and be successful in medical school. The National Academy of Science said that we need about 3.5 million new health care providers by 2030. So there will have to be a push to get more students from the HBCUs or minority students from the larger institutions to go into healthcare fields. So that's another area that we have to really do a better job of getting. So we have one institution across the country, actually two, that really do a great job of sending students into the medical and healthcare fields. And we just need to do a better job in those institutions as well and make sure that the resources are there to ensure that we're preparing students to get into medical school and get out successfully. So a couple of things, yeah.
Thank you. Willarda Edwards, President of the National Medical Association, and I really want to say thank you to Dr. Innocent for this topic and bringing two experts to the table with respect to Alzheimer's disease. And I wanted to indicate that the National Medical Association recognizes this as part of our mission in terms of addressing health disparities. And so as part of what we're doing this year is we will be convening a consensus panel on Alzheimer's disease. We have the funding, so we will be moving forward with that and hope that our two experts here may be a part of that as well. And we certainly appreciate the information that you brought to us, and we'll be in touch.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I actually want to say that I spoke at the National Medical Association conference in Las Vegas with another colleague of mine, so they really are taking it very seriously. It was very well received, and so we were thrilled to come and talk with the National Medical Association. So thank you.
Well, this has been a terrific session. Please give a round of applause to our presenters. And thanks so much to all of you for your very, very active participation. This is exactly what we hope to get out of sessions. Good information going out, good questions coming in, so we get some real dialogue going throughout.
Jackie Bird. She was the one who gave me the bone marrow transplant.
Save a life while you can in your lifetime.